arms deals, every illegal drug known to man, and more. Susie had once told him she was always careful. She was so afraid they might get her. At the time, she could never quite identify they, but she claimed they were out there, and the whole hierarchy was so complicated and convoluted. There was no hope if they decided you were done. Alfie's superiors had looked at the evidence. They had gone in with SWAT and FBI assistance. They'd believed they had the element of surprise. They'd been wrong. The shootout was one of the largest and most deadly area law enforcement had engaged in. They took down a massive criminal empire, but he hadn't found Susie, and he had died in the effort. Looking for her so desperately, he hadn't even realized he was dead until he'd found his old partner. Quiet tears running down his cheeks as he knelt by Alfie's body. It was a shock to be dead. He didn't even remember the pain, but he knew almost immediately that he would linger, and he believed it all had to do with the events of the day. The fact that their surprise raid had not been a surprise, and there had been no sign of Susie. And while they had made a massive dent in the empire, they hadn't taken down the man they were after, a man referred to as John Smith. There were clues as to the identity of this man. It had been suggested through various minor criminals they'd picked up and incarcerated that John Smith just might be Rory Ayers. And it was all happening again. Alfie straightened. He'd been waiting as morning had broken. He was glad to have friends among the dead and among the living. He'd stumbled upon crew members by happenstance when they'd been at the cemetery. Now, when he knew something was up, when he could help in any way, he hitchhiked a ride from an unsuspecting driver and headed to crew headquarters. They were more than willing to help him, and had tried to do so before. But he believed rookie crew member Jordan Wallace was onto something that might have to do with John Smith, or the man who had been running things when he had died. A man who had cleanly disappeared, while his thugs were left to willingly die for him. Why? Why take bullets for another man? Alfie thought a series of recent crew cases might have been connected. One of the men arrested during an attempted Embracer murder had given them a description of the man who had recruited him. A man who had called himself John Smith. Alfie hadn't recognized the man from the drawing, but it could have been a man they had in custody. A man named Rory Ayers. Not as he appeared now, but a man could easily change his appearance. Alfie knew Jackson Crow, field head for the Krewe of Hunters, believed him, and believed in him. There was someone pulling a lot of strings, a master puppeteer who could make people do things they had an itch to do, and things they didn't want to do. Alfie wasn't waiting for a crew member right now, but rather a man who had his own brand of talents and who was, by chance, related to a crew member. He smiled in relief. He could see Patrick Law was making his way toward him. He'd reached out to Patrick because he'd been concerned about Jordan. Of course, worried as he was, Alfie could have hitchhiked to the crew headquarters. But he wasn't sure why he was so worried. Though young, Jordan Wallace was a competent agent. She was on an assignment with the full backing and support of Jackson Crow and the Krewe of Hunters. And what she was doing wasn't crashing into a den of vipers per se. Her intent was to watch over possible victims. From the time Alfie had met Jordan, she had wanted to help him, and he wanted to help her. She was young, bright, a crack shot, and a hell of an actress, which made her excellent for undercover work. Maybe too excellent. Just as Susie reminded him of the daughter he might have had, Jordan reminded him of the sister he might have had because of her energy, her passion, and her love for others. "Hello," Patrick called to him. "You came," Alfie said. He had never suspected Patrick would blow him off on purpose, but sometimes life had a way of getting in the way of promises, especially when those promises were made to the dead. "As I said I would, Alfie," Patrick said, frowning slightly at the idea he'd expect anything less. "Well, thank you, Dr. Law." Patrick winced. "I never go by Dr. Law. But you are a doctor, right? Of psychiatry, and I have my degree in psychology, but I've never liked..."